Welcome to Stone Creek Turnings. For this week's video, I'm going to try to make a baby rattle. And this is kind of one that I had made a while ago where the other half kind of didn't work out right. So I'm going to try to actually make a baby rattle with two sides on it. For materials for this time, I'm going to use two different types of wood. Both of these are about 3/4 of an inch in thickness. And I'm going to basically drill a hole with a forester bit into both of these, line up the holes, put some crushed gravel or some crushed rocks in those holes, glue them together, and then we'll turn the rattle shape, and using two different rocks to try and get a little bit of a different sound when you shake it. So both of these boards will have to go through the planer, make sure they're nice and smooth, and then we'll work on actually getting the dimensions laid out on there, and let the glue dry, and then start turning. So let's get started. Okay, before we jump into gluing and drilling and turning, what I'm also going to do is cut these boards into a 1.5 8-inch long blanks, so that'll make it so it's square when it's all glued together. That'll also make it a lot easier to know where to put the holes, and I always cut it a little bit longer so that when I actually turn the rounded part, I have a little bit of an extra nub in the end, so I can cut that off and sand it, and don't have to worry about the mark from the drive center carrying over onto the finished part. So I'm going to take these to the bandsaw, just cut those out, and then we'll get back to doing the measurements and figuring out how deep we want to drill that hole. Okay, now that I have all of the blanks cut out, I did one set that was 7 inches, one that's 8 inches, just to kind of see which one's better. For the 7-inch one, I decided to go ahead with a 1/2 inch extra on both sides. I went ahead and drew a 1.5 inch square on both sides, because when I put these together, it's going to be 1.5 inches, so I kind of want to make sure that I know how big that ball is going to be. And I went ahead and put a center in that square, and I'm going to go ahead and use my forester bit to actually drill a hole into all 4 of these spots. I'll probably drill about halfway down, so maybe 3/8 of an inch on both sides. So I have a nice large enough pocket on both of these to put some rock fragments in there. And then once those all drilled out, I will actually flip them over, making sure that I mark on the outside where those holes are. So when I turn, I can kind of be aware of that. Glue them together, and then dry it, and come back and see how it all turns out. I'm going to be making 2 of these just to make sure that I have one that turns out, and to see if the 7-inch is better or the 8-inch length works out better. So now I put some holes in there. Alright, so both of these blocks have been drilled out to 3/8 of an inch. Thankfully, as expected, all the holes line up really well, which is kind of what we need. I have transferred the lines on the outside so that when I actually glue these things together, I'll know where that pocket is and kind of where to leave it the thickest as I'm turning it. Ideally, this will turn into a 1.5 inch ball after I actually turn it. So I kind of need to know where to keep the wood thick, because if I actually cut through too far, you'll see the pocket there, the stones will all leak out, and you wouldn't want that around a baby. So now I'm going to basically put some rocks in here and glue it up. I have some of this crushed gravel that I'm putting in, and I also have just some normal stones. I'm probably going to be putting them in a vise with a towel over top of it to kind of keep the fragments from flying. I'll put it in a vise, clamp it down, and just kind of crush them into smaller bits that will actually fit into the hole better, and give it a better sound. So on to the next step. I found out that really just hitting the rocks right on top of the anvil of the vise under a towel works the best. You can kind of customize the size of the rocks that you end up with. Now that they're both, and you can also customize how many rocks you put in there and how much gravel you put in there, just to kind of get the sound that you want. Keeping in mind that when it's solid like this, it's going to be a lot duller sound than when you actually turn it. It's going to be a lot thinner, so it'll resonate a lot differently, but it kind of gives you an idea. Now I'm ready to put the glue on there. I'm going to you have to be very careful in putting glue around that hole so you don't get glue inside, because you really don't want to glue the rocks to the side. They might eventually break free, but it'll definitely hinder the sound that you're going to get if you get glue inside there. And I'm going to basically be careful to glue the middle as well. Most of this middle will be turned away, but it's always good to have that wood solid. I'm going to kind of smear the wood on there both sides, let it get tacky for 10-15 seconds, stick it together, clamp it, and then let it fully dry before I go ahead and put that on the lathe. I think I've got both sides to a shape that I'm happy with. I believe I have plenty of extra wood here, so it should be strong enough so that if somebody does hit this against something, it's not going to crack open. When I turned it, I have that 1-inch hole in there, and then the 1.5-inch extra wood on the outside, a 1/4 inch on both sides. So it should be plenty of extra wood to kind of shape it and not have to worry about cutting through the sides. I did do a little bit of wire burning detail there, just to kind of give it a little bit more of an interesting look to it. And also it should be safe, no markers or inks or anything like that. Alright, I have finished my sanding. It's really smooth. So now what's left to do is put on a slight finish. Because this is a baby rattle and I want it to be 100% safe to put in anybody's mouth, I'm going to use beeswax as my coating. That's really nice because you kind of smear it on and then you rub it with some friction and it heats up and it almost just kind of melts and just seeps into the wood and gives it a nice finish, a nice soft finish, and completely safe for children. So I'm not really trying to be too careful about how I'm putting it on. Just trying to get a nice finish. So once I actually used a rag or anything like that, that's when it really starts to heat up, and you can see it as it melts with the friction. If there's ever any spots that you think you might have missed, it's really easy just to go back. Because once this rag gets a little bit of wax on it, it kind of self-applies to any spot that you might have missed. Getting in the cracks is a little bit tougher, but not impossible. Alright, that's a great, nice, soft glow to it. So now that I've finished with the main body of it, I'm going to work on the ends. I'm going to get them down so they're small, yet are still stable enough so that I can kind of take it off the lathe, cut it, sand it, and not have to worry about this thing falling off the lathe, flying off the lathe, or possibly this wood splitting and splitting into the baby rattle itself, which would kind of ruin the whole process. So now the only thing left for me to do is to actually take it off the lathe, cut the nubs off, do a little hand sanding, put a little bit more wax on the tips, heat it up so they're nice and coated, and this will be a finished baby rattle. Alright, so I've come to the end of another project. This baby rattle, it turned out really well. You can kind of hear it. For different sounds, you can also get like those small little metal bells. I think that's what's inside this one. But really, it's really light, very smooth, as you can kind of tell. The ends there, where I had to sand it and put the wax on and then heat it, You really can't tell a difference in the finish. I already kind of know who I'm going to give this to, so I think they'll really enjoy it. This was the 7-inch long blank to start with. I think this is a pretty good length. I have the 8-inch still in the lathe that I'm going to finish up pretty soon, but the overall finished length of this is just over 6 inches, and I think any bigger than that, it's almost just going to be too big for a young baby to be holding. The only problem I've had with these in the past, when you give them as gifts, is that the parents don't actually don't let their kids play with it because they don't want to damage it. They want to keep it. So it's not really a problem. It's just kind of, it is nice that the kids will be able to grow up and they'll kind of be able to have this as a memory of their childhood, and maybe they'll give that to their kids when they get older. So it's a fairly simple project to do. It takes up very little wood, and the only problems I've had in the past is you kind of forget where you are in relation to the holes that you've drilled, and you kind of cut through. That's kind of why this one's only a half baby rattle, because the other end of it I actually had cut through, so you could see a little bit of the opening in there, or the hole inside of it. So I had to cut it off and just salvaged it as this. But as long as you're kind of conservative in how much wood you cut off, I use the 1-inch Forester bit. You can use a smaller bit than that, but just keep in mind the smaller that opening is on the inside, the less room the material has to move around on the inside. You can kind of get creative in whatever you want to use in there. I clamped this pretty good, let it dry really quite a while, so I'm not really too worried about a kid whacking something so hard it's going to crack open and you'll have broken rocks around. But I think they'll really enjoy enjoy me giving this to them. So until next time, thanks for watching.